everybody. Welcome to Reimagining Business with New Tech Products. But really, it's been an amazing year. There have been 43 unicorns this year so far, with December still to go. And it's been very exciting. And we thought this would be a very interesting subject to think about in terms of looking at brick and mortar business and saying how can brick and mortar established companies adopt new tech, new products, and come up with a way of leveraging them for business value. So we're looking at a great panel today. I would love to introduce folks that will join the panel. We have Piyush Chowhan from LuLu Group. We have Deepak Sharma from Kotak. We have Sarajit from Tata Steel. And we have Manoj Garg from NatWest. Welcome, gentlemen. If you can join the stage with me, appreciate that. Wonderful. And we'll have three more gentlemen join us. But Piyush, maybe we can kick this off. I don't know if my introduction kind of to the topic came through or not, but I'll do a quick intro before we start. So that we thought this topic of reimagining business with new tech products would be very interesting. There are 43 unicorns that were created in India this year. Some massive change in how the Indian ecosystems kind of come together. And this is more unicorns than have ever in the last years ever. So this is an incredible change in the ecosystem. And we're looking at brick and mortar companies, looking at how they can integrate and leverage this entrepreneurship coming in from India with new tech being associated with startups. And successful startups turning into unicorns, and how do you take those products and put them together? So we have Piyush Chowhan from LuLu. Piyush, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Monish. Great to be here, and I think it's a great event for sure. Every year, NPC grows bigger and bigger. I've been associated for a few years now, and as you rightly said, the ecosystem is booming and flourishing. No better time than this, I suppose.
That is true. How do you look at it from your perspective? As a retailer, as someone who differentiates with technology, how do you think about your digital transformation strategy? How are startups integrated into that? Would you tell us about that? How do you look at this from a roadmap perspective as well as your differentiator in business perspective?
Sure, and I think the way I see things is obviously enterprises are, to put it simply, struggling. Yeah, at least the kind of so-called old enterprises which were built on physical world are now transitioning into the digital world. Yeah, and no different. Retail is in the kind of cusp of that transition, in which retail is going to be very digital in the days to come, and so. It's very important. The way I see things is we have to start bringing in new capabilities, new skill sets within the enterprises. And one of the ways that I have seen that work is to work with the startup ecosystem. While you're put the lights on business of running large ecosystem enterprise applications still continues, and that needs to be there. It is time for enterprises to look at innovating with the help of startups. I'm pretty sure almost all large enterprises today run accelerator programs. They run innovation programs which are closely integrated with the startup ecosystems. And that is, to me, one of the very, very important aspects of how do you keep your innovation cycle up and running by working with the startup ecosystem. While your regular activities of, let's say, managing and building large enterprise solutions can continue, you run a parallel track working with very nimble, agile organizations in which you can do fast prototyping, fast POCs, and bring that product and design thinking mindset so that your new skill set is then transferred to the entire organization and you become a very, very digital native organization.
I appreciate that, Piyush. And that's one of the challenges, of course, is, large enterprise runs in one way, agile kind of startups run in a very different way. I would love to, go to Manoj. Head of Engineering, NatWest, welcome to the panel. I had a question for you. How do you think large enterprises match this space that Piyush talked about, and how does it work in the enterprise for you, working with startups and adopting new tech, new products?
I think the answer is collaboration, Monish, right? I mean, both of us have our strengths, and we can, I think, kind of coexist as well as collaborate. For example, what startups bring to the table is a very hands-on, deep technology, experience, as well as fast-paced kind of, development and very good market intel and adapting to that. Especially, let's say, with post-pandemic, things are drastically changing, and a lot of enterprises, are not, at pace with that. However, the startups, they definitely are. And what we bring to the table is, that enterprise view, that the end customer, what is that, that customer needs, as well as how to fit it in with the whole governance model, the regulatory model, and all of that. So I think, to put it very simply, collaboration is the key, and getting at the right stage is also very important. When the product is evolving, where you can actually, make changes at that early stage. So that's where I think, we all can come together.
No, thank you, Manoj. And I'm going to go to Sarajit. Sarajit, Chief of Digital Solutions at Tata Steel. Welcome, and thank you for being here. With a brick and mortar like steel, how do you think about digital transformation, and what areas do you focus on to work with startups, with new tech, with new products, and especially in an agile way, especially coming in from a very traditional, very different brick and mortar industry?
Oh, thanks, Monish, and good evening to everyone. So I think the whole concept is agility. I think is more a mindset rather than where you are coming from. I would like to thank everybody who worked on stage. And just to get me on stage, and just to give you a sense, I've traveled from Ranchi to Delhi to Amritsar, and for whatever reasons, every road in Amritsar was blocked. It took me 3 hours from the airport, and the iPad did not work. There was some strange problem in the microphone. I could hear everyone, but nobody could see us. And then on another laptop that the guys who have called me here, Tata Advanced Systems Limited, got me, and then we kind of figured out on another laptop that this is working, right? So it's as Manoj says, it's about collaboration. It's about a do or die attitude, saying, look, we'll do whatever it takes till the last moment to be on the stage or to do whatever we have set out to do. And I think to answer the specific question, this is how Tata Steel looks at digital. Tata Steel looks at digital as solution oriented, desired outcome oriented, business led. Startups also look at the whole digital in the same manner. The only, I think, the real challenge comes when Tata Steel's clock speed and scale meets the startup's clock speed and their appetite for scale. And that's where I think the real tension lies. It's very important that we work with a startup that has the ambition, the appetite, as well as the depth of capabilities to service us, and also has the staying power and the hunger to stay on. Because and I can say this because 2 years ago Mr. Narendran said this on stage, that Sarajit looks after the startup program in Tata Steel. Current performance is startup meets Tata Steel, startup dies. And we are happy to say that now we are working with over 30 plus startups.
Wow.
And in each of those cases, there have been three things which are there. One, the startup has IP and is looking at building IP and not bailing out. Second, the kind of engagement is sponsored by none other than the CEO of that startup. Anybody else just doesn't fly because they're not able to navigate. They don't have the hunger and passion to navigate Tata Steel. And I think the third thing is that the end results of success are very clearly defined. And if we are not getting there within the time frame, then we call it quits. We let the startup do whatever it is doing, and Tata Steel then goes and tries to find alternative. Over to you, Monish.
No, really appreciate that, Sarajit. And such a great answer, right? And it's all about collaboration. It's all about teamwork. It's all about kind of getting a solution together to make sure that we can deliver business value. I think it's very interesting from the perspective of how it's not just working with startups. I think you're absolutely right. The ambition of the startup to kind of build an enterprise scale platform or product is so critical to work. I think you made a great point there. And I would love to go to Deepak Sharma. Deepak, President and Chief Digital Officer of Kotak. Your business, I presume, because it's a banking business, is built on digital nowadays, right? People hardly go, well, they do, but now percentage is decreasing, go to a physical bank. So you must be at the forefront of technology, especially adopting modern tech. How do you look at this? How do you look at startups? What areas do you look at, and how do you work with them? Love to hear your views. Deepak, we can't hear you. Let's see if you're on mute. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
So I think we started this journey many years ago, and in this process, both startups learned and so did we, right? So I think for this journey started about 6-7 years back, and like any relationship, you start initially getting to know, you take some stance, and then you figure out what works and doesn't work, both for startup as well as for enterprise like us. So I think we have gone through our own learning curve. Things that we figured out doesn't really work is the old terminology of POCs, proof of concepts. We used to talk a lot about it. And startups also used to say, okay, let's do a POC. And our teams used to say. And then we figured out it's easy to get into a POC, but it's very difficult to make it into a production or a live situation at scale. And because that's where a lot of breakage happens. Because you figure out that the solution either does not meet a production and deployment level grade, or it probably from a regulatory and compliance lens, where banks have a very, very strong foundation, it does not pass because probably the startups don't understand that landscape well enough. Or probably the startups just do not have, like Sarajit rightly mentioned, the appetite to scale up to serve large enterprise customers. Right. So having gone through this, now we change this whole concept to say we will run a pilot and not a POC. That means you should be ready to deploy it for customers. It may be at a limited scale, but it has to be a production grade. The other learning came through this was about whether startups are going to stay in business long enough to serve. Because one of the things often get debated was, what is the longevity of this startup? Are we taking a risk, and is that risk commensurate for a financial service industry which has a very, very sensitive to regulatory and risk practice? So we started working very closely with the investors who have backed the startup. And I think this partnership for us worked well. So a lot of VCs today, they reach out to us when they make an investment into a startup where the potential client list or use case can be financial service. For them, the interest is to vet out whether we would be interested in a concept like this, whether we will end up becoming one of their clients. That helps them validate early on. At the same time, for us, the comfort is that the investors are looking at these companies with a long-term interest. And I think that gives both of us a confidence about where the company, because if a startup is going to go every 8 or 10 months raising their next round, I'm worried. Because how much time are they actually investing in building the core product versus trying to stay on in the game? So I think we started to work closely in this ecosystem. And the third part, what we did is we rearranged and realigned ourselves internally. Because a lot of startups used to tell us that large enterprises like ours is difficult to work with because there are too many functions and navigating it is a challenge. So we took a two-pronged strategy by not just creating an outreach program where our teams reach out to the companies that we see are doing interesting work, be it in multilingual stuff or Indian languages, facial, AI based application, fraud risk and security, because we have a clear set of priorities of areas that we are modernizing or upgrading. So when we started doing an outreach, startups started to feel a lot more comfortable. That it's not that startups have to find us, we are going and finding those niche in the market. And as we went through this success, I think today we have got almost over 150 odd startups who work very closely with us. We also enabled close to about 300 odd APIs where our startups can consume our APIs and create new products and develop it alongside us. So our model then changed not just where startups work for us, but startups work with us. And as we develop and deploy a lot of these solutions at scale, I think we started to see much greater confidence in the value that we brought through these partnerships.
No, wonderful, Deepak. Thank you. I think this will be very invaluable for founders and entrepreneurs in the audience. I think investors, I picked that one because I've gone through that myself. Investors are key because if you have good investors, then customers will find you. And especially, when you said you use investors as validation and investors use you as validation, I think both of these are, extremely, symbiotic, because that builds confidence going into the relationship.
I think Monish has kind of frozen, and yeah, he's also left. So maybe Piyush, you can talk about some of the challenges and what message you have on about for the startups who are listening in.
Sure. I think one of the points which Deepak mentioned is always the case, right? Either the startup has to be ready, or people believe that there has to be something which is production worthy. Now that is a chicken and egg problem, in which there may be situation in which the startup may not be ready, and that is where I think there is a little bit of friction. So if you run a very large program with multiple startups with a lot of force, that makes sense. But if you don't have that, maybe there are startups who are working with organizations which don't have a very large outreach program, which do not have a very, very standard kind of an acceleration mode or that kind of stuff. It is very important for people to work with them and go along in the journey. Because I have always seen and believed that whenever we have seen products, the earlier mindset was the product has to be ready. But to me, no product is ever ready. Yeah. And that is the mindset that people need to bring in when you start working with the startup ecosystems, and say that, first, I am ready to fail, but are you ready to commit? Are you willing to fail with me and then make it successful alongside with me? That is the message that we want to see when we are working with startups. And we have seen many products which don't work. Yeah. And it is the management which then has the appetite to say that, yeah, it is okay, it didn't work, but at least we learned that these things don't work in our context. Yeah. So, for example, facial recognition, video analytics has been there for quite a while. Yeah. And we've tried multiple technology. People said they will put it on the gates of our stores. People have put it on the ceiling. People have put it in the back room.
Yeah.
And believe me, there is no solution which has worked till date, which is seamless. Yeah. And that is the fact today.
So Piyush, before I hand it over to Monish, sorry, Monish, just to catch the thread while you had disappeared, I'm very curious to know from Manoj that what proportion of your engineering, say, currently is happening through startups, roughly, and do you have some sort of a target of what you would source from them, going forward? Because I think that will be very interesting to startups. And Monish, sorry,
I really appreciate you taking over. I think this is
my curiosity in your absence. Yeah, Monish.
Appreciate that. Go ahead, Piyush.
Yeah, I think there are a number of cases, Sarajit. For example, especially in the RPA space, right? There are things like ICR or the natural language processing, etc., for which building anything internal was never really a good idea. And having somebody who has done it, and we just help them scale up to our needs and to our customer needs. That worked very, very well. Similarly, in this specific, software engineering space, a lot of these things, the Devops or engineering tools, etc., they started as the, startups at one point of time, right? Either through open source or things like that. And now they are serving the whole big enterprises. So I think, to put it simply, I think, yes, they are not startups now, but we are working all the companies which were a startup at some point of time. As such, the mandate, I mean, it's not a mandate that, go only work for the startup. The mandate is to look at the best possible solution and see, what can we do in, very, very quickly, very, very, that is very simple and is a solution for us, for our customers overall. And, of course, fits into the regulatory and compliance framework, as Deepak said, for the banks, that's like the most important thing.
Right. So, and Sarajit, you actually pulled a very good thread overall. I think one thing when you talk about reimagining business with new tech is the question that's always asked uh, is working with startups the only alternative? And that means you have to bet on that effort, obviously doing all of the lights on work that you do. And as decision makers, what would you tell startups in terms of thinking about their business when they're working with you? Because one is, hey, if I have to go for the next 5 years, 10 years, if I would look long term, these are one is the tech, like, you think about blockchain, you think about AI, you think about RPA, maybe now swarms, 3D printing, there's a big list there in terms of maybe brick and mortar companies may not invest at this time. Maybe it will take 5-10 years before that. But that expertise in these more technically agile companies in the startup ecosystem will help you reimagining that business. How would you look at this from that perspective? Are there areas, and how would you guide founders in terms of exploring those areas? Any thoughts? Maybe you can start with Deepak.
Yeah, I think for us, looking at startup is not the only way to answer that first question, because while we work with startup, we are also upgrading significantly our in-house own research, development, and product creation capability. So startups also help us become a catalyst of change internally. So the benefit of startup is two-pronged. I think, as we all know, that when you just outsource to a vendor, you only get project executed, but you have zero learning of that. When you build it yourself, even if you fail, the learning stays with you. And I think startups to me come somewhere in between the two models. So while you cannot completely in-source from a vendor-led model, but when you work with startups, you are also more adaptable to making some mistakes, doing course correction, learning as you go. And it's more about organizations going through this change of mindset, that not everything is known upfront, especially when you are building a lot of digital solutions, when you are building some of the edge capabilities. You can't go wrong on the core systems. And I think for the large core systems, you continue to stay with large, reliable technology partners, because that's something that you have built and that still lasts for long. But I think all the edge capabilities, which creates eventually the value and needs a faster turnaround and speed to market, I think the startup mindset is what even organizations or large enterprises are embarking on. And I think you find that learning more symbiotic apart from working. And I think in this process, while founders get deeper understanding of the domain that we work with, we get to understand an agile way of testing, building on the fly. And I think there is a value for both. I won't say it's a value, unlike a typical large IT projects outsourced to a vendor, where you only get delivery and no value necessarily in learning. Here there is a value of co-creation, and I'm quite upbeat about prospect of co-creating rather than treating startup as other set of vendors or partners as we used to do in traditional.
No, it's very interesting that you said that. I remember 6 years ago, I went to Germany with one of the largest automotive manufacturers in Germany. I had a salesperson with me, and we were talking with them for contract lifecycle management. And I was in my suit and tie and decked up, and I walk into the room, and everybody, all the Germans are in jeans and t-shirts. And I said, "What's going on here?" And the CIO of the company said, he met me and he said, "Monish, we want to learn from you, but we want to learn from you not just how you work, but we also want to learn, how you actually come to work," which was very revealing. And he said, "This is the mindset we are looking for to change in our 150-year-old company. And without that, we won't be able to work with you." And that stayed with me. I think, and 5 years later, they've been one of our largest customers and very successful implementation. Sarajit, have you had some examples like that, some successes? And maybe you all can pitch in with some, because we'd love to hear some of these stories.
Now, I would take this opportunity to actually distill out a couple of points that everyone made. So I think
Sure.
we are fundamentally asking the question of three things, right? Where should startup engage? How should startups engage? And what should the larger companies do in order to make that engagement successful? I think the first part, which was said, is that there is a investor ask of a startup, and unless the startup fulfills that, the investors will not be interested. So I think it's important that the startup finds that space. So what is Tata Steel interested in today? Tata Steel is interested in circularity. Tata Steel is interested in carbon. So it's not just digital solutions. Anybody who can provide a solution in that. Similarly will be the case for Kotak and NatWest and the LuLu group, right? And the second part is my kind of title is written wrongly. It's actually called business transformation. Anybody who's talking about digital transformation in 2021, please short their stocks, and I can guarantee you that you will make a lot of money, because digital transformation is dead. It's about business transformation, which the company is trying to do. So I think it's very important that it focuses on the business, and that is where the point Deepak made, that unless you imbibe the domain as a startup, you know, the third, I think, point that Manoj made is very, very important, that ironically the first thing a startup should try to do is not be one. So, and that happens when they are able to provide scaled solutions in a reliable, standard manner. And I think the fourth point that Piyush made is very, very important. There are areas like safety, there are areas like video analytics and IoT and all of that coming together in safety, particularly industrial safety, where you have to migrate towards digital twins as a vector product solution where nobody has seen scale. No, and I say this with all the responsibility, there are 250 odd use cases which have to be solved reliably to come to us predicting that I can guarantee somebody would enter Tata Steel safely and go out. No single provider in the world, big or small, is anywhere close to even giving us any assurity at that. I'm not even talking pricing. I'm not even talking, anything more than that. So I think it all kind of wanted to take points that everybody made. Over to you, Manish.
No, no, absolutely. I think, but I would love to hear any success stories, because I think that's one of the things which are very interesting. If you're working in this, with tech and with startups, I'm sure the audience would also get motivated if they hear, hey, there are two examples. Maybe.
Sorry, Monisha, just to take two very quick success stories, 15 seconds each. One, tubes counting was done before startups came in, on US startup. It used to actually put the tubes into a truck, put straws into it, take out all the straws. Vehicle in vehicle time was 28 hours. We did image analytics, and now we can put tubes in tubes, because you could have never nest a tube because you couldn't put two straws in it. Very simple problem. We have brought down the vehicle in vehicle out time, and we can actually now nest tubes, and that's quite industry redefining. Second thing, we could not ever predict which routes cars are taking and which cars in the plant are going in the wrong way, because the whole day you couldn't have somebody monitoring. Now 24 hours of video footage, we are able to get it into 4 minutes of exceptions, which we can easily say, and then combined with ANPR, number plate recognition technology, we can say which car violated at what time. Here is your photo. Over to you, Manish.
Oh, thank you so much. Anybody like to pitch in with some examples?
Yeah, so I just want to add one use case. Obviously, as a retailer, we've always believed, so we've kind of always believed on the everyday low price model of retail. Yeah, which means that we don't run card-based loyalty, point-based loyalty schemes, and everybody in the world is saying why you don't run those kind of things. And since you don't run those schemes, you don't have customer data. Now, we were trying to figure out what is the other alternative of trying to kind of get customer data, because in today's context, if you don't have customer data, you're handicapped to a large extent. And when we kind of looked at this problem, we went out to most of the startups to see how do you solve this problem. Yeah, how do I get customer data without having a let's say a very, very high touch application which is out there. And then we kind of landed up with a couple of startups. We did a POC, and believe me, there was no ready-made solution, but there were solutions which were close to that, which means that let us work together. So even the startups had to pivot, even we had to pivot. Our thought process of getting that customer data in a particular way was something which was challenged, whereas the startup which brought in that solution, that also basically pivoted. And today we are working very, very closely. So one of the messages which I want to, and maybe somebody is asking that question, is how long do you require to validate this? To me, anything which does not work in the first 3 months, I think we should say that's enough, guys. Yeah, with the startup. I'm not saying with the large system, but anything which does not work or anything which is not deployable in the first 3 months is something that we would be really worried about. And that is the learning that I have put to my team, saying that, guys, if you're working on something, I want something in production running in a live location in a 3 months time. And if that does not happen, then we have to keep on discovering, do your design thinking exercises again, repivot whenever needed, and then you basically try to take the journey on. And that can happen only when you have deep collaboration with that startup. Unfortunately, there are a lot of so-called IT leaders or digital leaders who still have that buying and selling relationship, and we say, can I buy a solution, can I implement a solution? And that buying and implementing a solution somehow does not work in the modern context.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where, starting the relationship with investors. I think going to domain expertise, picking up your use cases, making sure that you're validating and you have the intent on the startup side as well as on the enterprise side to make it work as a partnership, not as a vendor model. So critical. Manoj, any thoughts on making sure that actually this works in reality, in the sense, what would you advise founders engaging with brick and mortar companies to do?
I think, to basically, I really liked what Deepak said, right? The co-creation is the key, right? There we are coming from two different spectrums. There is a tech, capability, very nimble, very agile. And then on the other side, the business perspective, the enterprise need and enterprise framework. So the two have to, co-create. And, I gave example of, something in the, the natural language processing where we had to do that. I guess, the startups, my suggestion is look at the business problem. Sometimes, technology is very swanky and, all of us want to get that shiny toy and, play with it, etc., etc. It's a good, self-satisfaction. But unless it is used and it is put to use by, the real business user, it just remains a toy. So I think just fill that gap and, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to collaborate and, move it forward.
No, wonderful. And we are coming to the, just to the end of our session. I'd love to kind of have some last minute thoughts from you, any pointers. I think one of the things I would love to hear is anything that you think is absolutely a must not do for founders when they engage. I think that would also be very useful in the context of, how you work with companies. Anyone?
I think one of the things I would say is that founders at times they jump on too early with a solution without understanding, what are the problem statements and getting more into it. I think while startup has the ability to be flexible, and I think that flexibility is a very important part of the value they bring in, they shouldn't end up behaving like some of the big tech firms who become over a period of time so rigid. And I think that is the biggest fear I see with some startups. As they start to get scale, they start to also demonstrate the very qualities that they were up against. So be very careful that don't lose that nimbleness and customer centricity and a problem solving approach.
No, that's a very good point. Anyone last word?
One point from my side. If you're at least coming to Tata Steel, I can say you need to be very, very clear on the why. The what and how will follow. But if you're bringing a what and a how, you can't invent the why after engaging with us, or even I think Deepak said the same thing in another way. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that, Sarajit. And I cannot thank you enough. I think you took this off. You had a great conversation, Sarajit. Thank you for stepping in and helping me probably helping everyone else when I had to, I was kicked out. But this has been a great conversation even for me. I think it's a very interesting thing in terms of thinking about how you actually work with large companies, how you work with a technology that you believe in as a founder, where you believe you have a solution, but you have to now convince a set of people across diverse experiences and a very different way of thinking to work together. And this has to be a partnership. So I think this has been a phenomenal conversation for me as well. So thank you so much. Let's see if we have any audience questions. Are we in a place to actually take some audience questions? Anyone on the NASSCOM side? Do we have a way of taking those if you have a few minutes? Otherwise, we'll call it a day. All right. So looks like we are on time. So thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a wonderful
Thank
day.
you.